What Once Was Mine, Chapter 43. Rapunzel. Her parents had sold her. The very people she was running to. The only people she could legally auction off under the laws of the land. The folks who had probably wanted a son instead, to inherit the kingdom and rule at their death. The king and queen who had immediately sent her away once it became clear what a dangerous baby she was, and hidden her in a tower until she was old enough to marry. When was all this arranged? When I was a baby? Rapunzel asked, trying to sound casual. I'm not precisely sure when exactly. I suppose word got out at some point. It became a thing, as they say, among us chosen few, around the time you were a child, before or around your first blood, when your powers really began to grow. Those of us who might be interested in such a thing were contacted and told you'd be available in a few years. Rapunzel's head spun. This didn't make any sense. Her powers hadn't changed that much over the years. Up until recently, she had only and always killed chickens. Nothing more or less, ever since she was little. But also, were the king and queen somehow actively spying on her? Did they get weekly reports from Gothel? Pray and forgive my confusion, Rapunzel said, trying to sound as formal as a person in one of her night stories. I'm curious how my parents kept such close eyes on the situation, hidden always as I was. Your parents? You mean the king and queen? What are you talking about? The countess asked in surprise. I don't think they know anything about this. I believe the plan is just sort of present it as a fait accompli. Here is your daughter, married to some stupid lord. Good luck with the idiot son she'll reproduce that will give her husband control over all the kingdom legally. Luckily for you, you are in my hands. At least you'll be spared that nasty son business. Wait. Hold, Rapunzel said, forgetting her put-on manners in the confusion. If it wasn't my parents who did this, who was it? Are you daft, girl? Your marriage, the auction, was all arranged by those who kept you captive. Mother Gothel. The secret part of Rapunzel that seemed to know things before she actively did accepted this information immediately. Almost accepted it. This answer connected all the dots for far more neatly than any other possible explanation. All the lies about her parenthood and her hair in danger, why she was kept prisoner, Gothel showing up out of nowhere to take her home, all the little bits and pieces that didn't add up quite right, but certainly didn't point to a normal, good-hearted mother. Despite fully understanding all of this, so the girl still partially trapped in the power, it was the final pain in a long-coming heartbreak. All right, I think that's enough questions, the countess declared. It's been a long day, and I'm tired. Magda here will show you to your room. Bathory gestured at the serving girl with her knife. But not at the footman. Rapunzel felt a surge of hope she would think like Flynn and find a way to get out. Bathory had started using her meat knife, yuck, on an apple and was quickly peeling it, flaying the shiny red skin off its perfect spirals. If you try to escape, I will of course punish you. You don't need your hands to work magic with your hair, I am told. But first we will punish Magda. And it will be slow, I promise. Rapunzel's stomach turned. Magda didn't even pale. Resigned with an exhaustion that could have only come from being terrified every moment she was alive, the maid motioned weakly for Rapunzel to follow her out of the room. Don't forget, Magda, she is a royal princess, Bathory said with a nasty smile. You will curtsy to her and show her all appropriate forms of respect. Rapunzel couldn't even tell if this woman was being ironic, or simply stating matters as she saw them. In the end, she supposed it didn't really matter. Rapunzel's room was at the top of the tallest turret of the castle, up a seemingly endless and dizzying spiral flight of stairs. Despite the placement, it was a fairly large room, and it had its own garderobe. There were furs of all kinds of animals hung to the walls for insulation, mismatched random some with holes. No artistry or respect for the animal. Like everything in Lady Bathory's castle, nauseating. Hysterical laughter almost overwhelmed Rapunzel when she looked out of the high, narrow windows in her room. I'm in a tower again, she explained to Magda. The girl nodded uncertainly, bowed, then corrected herself, curtsying. All this stuff about the blood and the girls, is it true? Rapunzel pressed. Magda's hazel eyes looked like distant moons, bleak and alien, that rolled tirelessly over an infertile land. There are almost no women left in my village because of her habits, she answered tonelessly. I suppose I'm next. I will bring you another meal later, she added with almost no pause between her thoughts. She took out a large black key, with the skull on its end, of course, and left to go on with her other tasks. The moment she was gone, Rapunzel fell on her bed in despair, overwhelmed by the idea of a person who had so completely given up. There was no fight, no desire, no anything left in Magda. If Rapunzel could escape, would she? Knowing Magda would die? Knowing she would lose her own hands? Although she suspected that Gothel actually knew so little about her powers, and told her bidders so little, and Batherley seemed so easily impressed and confused by magic that she could easily convince the Countess that hands were indeed necessary. Then again, the hideous woman might choose to cut off her nose or something else instead. Pascal crawled out of her hair and took a few tentative steps down her arm, toward the end of the bed, toward the fireplace, and then stopped when he seemed to realize it was unlit, and likely to stay unlit. He looked back at her, an unreadable expression in his Surian face. Rapunzel raised her arm so he could be in the air, looking down at her. He licked his left eye, tasted the currants with his long, sticky tongue, and patted her with one of his front feet. Hey, can you see or smell things I can't? Rapunzel asked. Can you help me find a way out of here? Pascal looked at it, the very solid, locked, banded with iron oaken door. He looked around the rest of the room, thinking. Then he gestured to the window, too narrow for even a small girl like Rapunzel, and she placed him carefully on the sill. He easily slipped through up to the outside. A moment later he was back. He shrugged. Perhaps he could make his own way down, eventually. And then what? How long would it take for him to find help? What form would that take? It would take an army to storm the castle, or the most elite sneak thief ever, Ryder, provided he survived this wound. And even then Magda's life hung in the balance. She's dead already, Rapunzel said aloud, thinking about the girl's eyes. It was the darkest thing she had ever thought. Another thing to thank Mother Gothel for. Mother, Rapunzel muttered. She had lied for 19 years about Rapunzel's real parentage and what had happened to them, and then quickly apologized when she found out and said it was for her own good. Rapunzel could almost swallow that in her desperation for someone to love her. The only person she had a connection for her entire life. A mother, even a bad one. But this mother had told a bunch of rich strangers about her murder hair, had promised her daughter's hand to be the one who paid the most. In fairy tales, things happened like this. So often, in fact, that a reader might even say that the princesses always knew it was their fate to be used as pawns. That's why they can run away when they could, or relaxed when the beast said they had been promised to turned out to be actually nice after all, despite his tusks. But in none of these stories did a mother and a daughter say, I love you more, I love you most. Was that just pure deception on Gothel's part? Were all her professions of love, even to infant toddler Rapunzel, a lie? Batherley was straight-up a monster, who was honest about her desires and motivation. She wanted to rule the world. She believed killing young women would allow her to stay young forever. Was that worse than a woman who sold a person she called daughter? Don't be so dramatic, Raps, she told herself aloud, stroking Pascal. Girls, lots of girls, have lost their lives to that beast downstairs. You're upset now because you've met Magda, and now you know her story, but you haven't been Magda. You've been lied to and made to feel love, and then realized you weren't, which is sad but not deadly. You can't compare the two at all. Right, Pascal? She turned over, face down onto the pillows, and wept.